The platform stood in the center of the clearing, rough wood stained dark with rain and time. Ara could feel every eye on her as the guard's hand pressed between her shoulder blades, pushing her forward. Her bare feet found the first step, then the second. The crowd's noise rolled over her like a wave, jeering and sharp. She had always known this moment might come. Every Wolfless Omega did. But knowing and standing here were different things entirely. The morning air bit at her skin through the thin shift they'd given her. No cloak, no dignity, just linen and fear, and the weight of 100 accusations she couldn't deny. Her wrists ached where the iron cuffs had been removed only moments before. They didn't need restraints now. There was nowhere left to run. Alpha Kale stood at the edge of the platform, his arms crossed over his broad chest. His dark hair was tied back, revealing the hard line of his jaw and the pale scar that ran from his temple to his cheekbone. His eyes were gray, cold as winter stone, and they hadn't left her face since she'd climbed the steps. He wore the simple, black tunic of a leader who didn't need decoration to command respect. His presence alone silenced the crowd more than any shout could. Ara tried to swallow, but her throat had gone dry. "Ara of the Silvercrest Pack," his voice carried without effort, low and edged with something she couldn't name. "You stand accused of failing your wolf, of bringing shame to your bloodline, of cowardice in the face of attack." Each word landed like a stone in her chest. She wanted to speak, to explain. But the words tangled behind her teeth, and her hands trembled at her sides. She forced them still. She wouldn't give them that. Not the shaking, not the tears that burned behind her eyes. Kale stepped closer, his boots heavy on the wood. He stopped an arm's length away, near enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. Lines that spoke of sleepless nights and hard choices. He wasn't old, perhaps 30 summers, but he carried the weight of more. "You were given time," he said, quieter now, meant for her alone. "Years, and still no shift, no wolf." "I tried." The words broke free before she could stop them, hoarse and small. "I tried every night, every full moon. Trying is not enough." His tone didn't rise, but it cut just as deep. "A pack cannot shelter weakness. Not when rogues circle our borders. Not when our children sleep behind walls we must defend." Ara's gaze dropped to the platform. Splinters pressed into her feet. She could feel the crowd shifting, restless, hungry for resolution. Some called for exile, others for blood. It didn't matter which. Both meant the same end for a wolf without a pack. "Shift now," Kale said, and the clearing fell silent. "Shift, or accept the consequence." Her head snapped up. "I can't." "You can." His gray eyes held hers, unblinking. "Or you've already chosen death." The crowd erupted again, voices overlapping, some shouting agreement, others crying out in protest. Ara barely heard them. Her pulse roared in her ears, and her chest felt too tight, as though her ribs might crack under the pressure. She closed her eyes. She had tried so many times before, tried until her body ached and her mind splintered with frustration. Tried until her mother held her in the dark and whispered that it didn't matter, that she was loved regardless. But her mother was gone now, and love had never been enough to save anyone. Ara pulled in a breath, then another. She reached inward, searching for the place everyone spoke of, the place where wolf and human met. She had felt it once, years ago, a flicker of something wild and warm. But every time she'd tried to grasp it, it slipped away like water through her fingers. This time, she didn't reach. She fell. Terror opened the door. Not the crowd's noise or Kale's voice, but the bone-deep certainty that she was about to die. That certainty cracked something inside her. Something she'd kept locked and silent for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. Pain lanced through her spine. She gasped, her knees buckling, and the platform seemed to tilt beneath her. Heat flooded her veins, not gentle, not kind, but searing and relentless. Her bones shifted, grinding and reshaping, and a scream tore from her throat before she could catch it. The crowd's noise changed. Gasps, shouts, movement. Ara's hands hit the wood, but they weren't hands anymore. Claws scraped against the grain, and her vision sharpened, colors bleeding brighter, sounds splitting into 1,000 layers. She could hear heartbeats, breathing, the rustle of cloth, and the whisper of wind through fur. Her fur. She opened her eyes. The world looked different, larger. The sense overwhelmed her. Earth and sweat and fear and something else. Something sharp and electric that she couldn't name. She tried to stand, her legs shaking, and felt the strength coiled in her limbs, unfamiliar and intoxicating. Then she saw Kale. He stood frozen, his expression unreadable, but his eyes had gone wide. He stared at her, not with disgust or anger, but with something closer to shock. She didn't understand. She'd shifted. Wasn't that what he wanted? Golden. Someone whispered from the crowd. Ara turned her head, catching sight of her reflection in a water trough at the platform's edge. Her wolf was smaller than most, lean and pale, her coat silvered like moonlight, but her eyes burned gold. Not yellow, not amber, gold, bright and molten, like sunlight trapped in glass. Kale took a step back, his hand lifting as though to ward off something he couldn't believe. His lips parted, but no sound came. The clearing had gone silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Heavier. Afraid. Ara's wolf whined low in her throat, confusion flooding her senses. She didn't know what this meant. Didn't know why the crowd had stopped shouting. Why the alpha who'd been ready to end her life now looked at her as though she were a ghost. Kale's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. Impossible! The word carried across the clearing, and Ara felt the weight of it settle over her like a shroud. She wanted to shift back, to demand answers, but her body wouldn't obey. The wolf was too new, too wild, and she didn't know how to let go. Kale's hand dropped to his side, his jaw tightening. Then he turned sharply to the guards flanking the platform. "Take her to the healer's wing." His voice had regained its steel, but there was something beneath it now, something unsteady. No chains, no dungeon. And no one speaks of this until I give the word. One of the guards hesitated. Alpha, the council, will do as I command. Kale's gaze snapped to the man, and the guard flinched. Move, now. Ara's wolf crouched low, instinct screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. The guards approached slowly, hands raised, and she felt the exhaustion beginning to creep in, her limbs growing heavy. Kale looked at her one last time before he stepped off the platform. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but his eyes lingered on hers. And in that moment, Ara understood. Whatever she had become, it terrified him. Ara woke in a room bathed in soft morning light, the kind that filtered through linen curtains and smelled faintly of lavender. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The bed beneath her was too soft, the blankets too clean. Then the ache in her bones reminded her, and the memory of golden eyes burning in a reflection brought it all rushing back. She shifted, wincing as her muscles protested. Her body felt wrong, stretched and reshaped, like a garment that had been worn inside out and never quite smoothed back into place. She pressed a palm to her chest, feeling her heartbeat thud slow and steady beneath her ribs. She was alive. She hadn't expected that. The room was small but tidy, with whitewashed walls and a single window overlooking the pack grounds. A chair sat in the corner, empty. A pitcher of water rested on the table beside her bed, along with a folded cloth and a sprig of something green she didn't recognize. Ara sat up slowly, her head swimming. She reached for the water, her hands trembling as she poured a cup and drank. The coolness of it grounded her, and she closed her eyes, trying to piece together what had happened after the guards had surrounded her on the platform. She remembered collapsing, remembered the world tilting sideways as her wolf finally let go, the shift reversing in a rush of pain and light. Someone had caught her before she hit the ground. She thought it might have been Kale, but the memory was hazy, fractured. And then, nothing. Ara set the cup down and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her bare feet touched cool wooden planks, and she stood, testing her balance. Her legs held, though they felt unsteady, and she moved to the window, peering out at the world beyond. The pack grounds stretched out below her, familiar and distant all at once. She could see the training yard, the communal hall, the edge of the forest where the border patrols ran at dawn. It looked the same as it always had, but something in her chest told her it would never feel the same again. She had shifted. She had a wolf, and her eyes, golden. Ara didn't know what that meant, didn't know why Kale had looked at her the way he had, as though she were something dangerous and precious all at once. But she knew it had changed everything. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned, her pulse quickening, but didn't move. The knock came again, gentler this time. "Ara," a voice called, female, older, steady. "May I come in?" Ara swallowed. "Yes." The door opened, and a woman stepped inside. She was gray-haired and calm-eyed, dressed in the simple robes of a pack healer. She carried a tray with bread, cheese, and a small bowl of broth, and she set it down on the table without ceremony. "You'll need to eat," the woman said, her tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. "Your body's been through a lot." Ara nodded, though her stomach felt knotted. "Where am I?" "The healers, wing, alphas, orders." The woman straightened, smoothing her hands over her apron. "You've been asleep for most of a day. We weren't sure you'd wake so soon." "A day?" Ara's voice came out hoarse. What happened after I shifted?" The woman's expression softened, though her gaze remained cautious. "The Alpha called off the execution. Ordered you brought here instead of the dungeon. He's kept guards outside your door, but they're not to harm you." She paused, studying Ara's face. "You don't remember?" Ara shook her head. "Only pieces." The healer nodded slowly. "That's normal. First shifts take a toll, especially late ones. Yours was... well, it was unlike anything I've seen." Ara's hands clenched at her sides. "Because of my eyes." The woman didn't answer right away. She moved to the window, glancing out at the grounds below, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "Golden eyes haven't been seen in this pack for 3 generations. Some say longer. The elders have stories, but most of us thought they were just that. Stories." "What do the stories say?" Ara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The healer turned back to her, her expression unreadable. "That the golden-eyed wolves were the first, the ones who built the packs, who held the old bonds before they fractured. They say the bloodline died out in the wars, but… She trailed off, her gaze lingering on Ara. The Alpha will want to speak with you himself. I'm not the one to explain it. Ara felt a chill settle over her skin. Does he think I'm dangerous? The woman hesitated, then shook her head. I don't know what he thinks, but he hasn't let anyone near you except me. And he's stationed his most trusted guards outside. She gestured toward the tray. Eat. Rest. You'll need your strength. She left. Before Ara could ask anything more, the door closing softly behind her, Ara stood alone in the quiet room, her mind racing. She moved to the table and picked at the bread, though she had no appetite. The broth was warm and plain, and she forced herself to take a few sips, knowing the healer was right. Her body ached. Her wolf ached, curled somewhere deep inside her chest, exhausted and weary. Ara set the bowl down and sank back onto the bed, pulling her knees to her chest. She let her head rest against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She thought of her mother, of the night the rogues had come, the night everything had shattered. Ara had been 14, small for her age, and still waiting for her wolf to wake. Her mother had been in the garden when the howls began, and Ara had been at the edge of the clearing, frozen in terror as the rogues tore through the perimeter. Her mother had fought. Ara remembered the sound of snarling, the flash of teeth and claws in the moonlight. She remembered her mother's voice, urgent and fierce, telling her to run. But Ara hadn't run. She'd stood there, rooted to the ground, willing her wolf to come, begging her body to shift so she could fight, so she could help. But nothing had happened. Her mother had died protecting her, and Ara had done nothing. The pack had found her hours later, curled beside her mother's body, still human, still broken. Kale had overseen the trial. He'd been younger then, newly named Alpha after his father's death, and his judgment had been swift. Ara was wolfless, he'd said. A liability. She would be given one final chance to prove herself, and if she failed, the pack could no longer afford to keep her. That chance had come yesterday, on the execution platform, with the whole pack watching. Ara opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling. She'd spent years believing she was broken, believing her wolf had abandoned her, or worse, that she'd never had one at all. And now she didn't know what she was. Golden-eyed, ancient bloodline, prophecy. The words felt too big, too heavy. She didn't want them, didn't want the weight of whatever they meant. But she was alive, and that had to count for something. Ara lay back on the bed, pulling the blanket over her shoulders. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and she could hear the distant sounds of the pack moving through their day. Voices, footsteps, the low rumble of cartwheels on stone. She closed her eyes and tried to rest, though her mind refused to settle. Somewhere beyond her door, Alpha Kale was deciding what to do with her, and Ara had no idea whether he would protect her, or whether he'd find another way to make her disappear. Ara woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her door. She sat up slowly, her body still aching from the transformation. The blanket slipped from her shoulders as she pressed her hands against the mattress, steadying herself. The room was brighter now, sunlight streaming through the narrow window and warm slants across the floor. She didn't know how long she'd slept. Time felt slippery, unanchored. The footsteps paused just beyond the door. Ara's breath caught. She waited, muscles tensing despite the exhaustion that still weighed heavy in her limbs. A soft knock broke the silence. "Come in," she said, though her voice came out quieter than she'd intended. The door opened and a woman stepped inside. She was older, maybe 50, with silver streaks threading through dark hair tied back in a braid. Her expression was calm, watchful. She carried a tray with a bowl of soup and a piece of bread, steam curling gently from the bowl's surface. "You must be hungry," the woman said, crossing to the small table near the window. Ara stared at her, uncertain. The woman set the tray down and turned, folding her hands in front of her. She wore simple clothes, practical and clean, and her scent was faint. Lavender, maybe. Something soft. "My name is Marin," the woman continued. "I'm one of the healers. Alpha Kale asked me to check on you." Ara swallowed. Is he coming here?" Marin tilted her head slightly, considering. "Not yet. He's in council at the moment, but he will come when the time is right." "What does that mean?" Ara asked, her hands twisted in the blanket. "What's happening?" Marin moved closer, her gaze steady and kind. "You're safe," she said simply. "That's what matters right now." Ara wanted to believe her. She wanted to feel the truth of those words settle into her chest and ease the knot of fear that hadn't loosened since she'd woken, but safety felt like a foreign concept, something she'd lost the ability to recognize. "They were talking about me," Ara said. "Last night, I heard them." Marin didn't deny it. She pulled the chair from the table and sat, folding her hands in her lap. "People talk," she said gently, "especially when something unexpected happens. You shifted yesterday, Ara, in front of the entire pack. And your wolf, your eyes." "Golden," Ara whispered. Marin nodded. "Yes, golden. That means something here." "Something old." Ara's chest tightened. "I don't understand what it means. I don't understand any of this." "You will," Marin said. "In time. But for now, you need to eat. And rest. Your body has been through a great deal." She stood and gestured to the tray. Ara's stomach twisted with hunger at the sight of the soup, but she hesitated, still unsure. Marin smiled, a small, patient expression, and moved back toward the door. "I'll be nearby if you need anything," she said. "You're not a prisoner here, Ara. You're a guest. Remember that." The door closed softly behind her, and Ara was alone again. She stared at the tray for a long moment before finally rising from the bed. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, but she made it to the table and sank into the chair. The soup smelled good. Simple. Warm. She picked up the spoon and took a careful sip, the heat spreading through her chest and easing some of the tightness there. She ate slowly, methodically, letting the routine of it ground her. The bread was fresh, soft in the center with a crust that gave under her fingers. She ate half of it before setting the rest aside, her stomach full but her mind still churning. A guest, Marin had said, not a prisoner. But Ara didn't know if she believed that. Not yet. She stood and walked to the window, resting her hands on the sill. The view looked out over the central courtyard of the pack house. Below, wolves moved through their day, some in human form, some shifted, padding across the stones with easy grace. Children chased each other near the fountain, their laughter carrying faintly through the glass. It looked peaceful. Normal. Ara felt like an outsider looking in, the way she always had. She turned away from the window and paced the length of the room. Her thoughts circled back to the platform, to the moment her wolf had finally torn free. The pain of it, the terror. And then, the stillness. The way the crowd had gone silent. The way Kale had stared at her, his expression unreadable. She didn't know what he'd seen in her eyes, didn't know what it meant to him or to the pack, but she knew it had changed something. The door opened again without warning, and Ara spun, her heart lurching in her chest. Kale stood in the doorway. He was alone this time. No guards flanking him, no council members at his back. He looked different, quieter maybe. Less like the alpha who had sentenced her, and more like a man who carried too much weight on his shoulders. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, his gaze finding hers immediately. Ara's breath stilled. She didn't move, didn't speak, She wasn't sure what to say. Kale crossed the room slowly, his movements deliberate, careful. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. His eyes were the same pale gray she remembered, sharp and assessing. But there was something softer in them now, something she couldn't name. "I wanted to see how you were," he said. His voice was low, steady. "Marin said you woke." Ara nodded, her throat tight. I'm fine." Kale's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You don't have to lie to me." She looked away, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't want you to say anything," Kale replied. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right, that you had what you needed." Ara's chest ached. She didn't understand this version of him. The gentleness in his tone, the way he looked at her, like she was something fragile, something worth protecting. "Why did you stop it?" she asked suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "Why didn't you just let them finish?" Kale's expression shifted, something raw flickering across his face. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because I saw your eyes," he said. "And I knew I'd made a mistake." Ara stared at him, her pulse loud in her ears. "I thought you were Wolfless," Kale continued. I thought you were a risk the pack couldn't afford. But I was wrong. And I'm sorry, Ara, for what I put you through, for what I made you believe about yourself." The apology hung in the air between them, fragile and unexpected. Ara didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know how to hold it without breaking. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale met her gaze, and for the first time she saw something like resolve settle into his features. "Now," he said quietly, "we figure out what it means. Together." Ara's breath hitched. She wanted to ask him what he meant by that. Wanted to demand answers, clarity, something solid to hold on to. But before she could speak, Kale stepped back toward the door. "Rest," he said. "We'll talk more later, I promise." He left without waiting for a reply, the door closing softly behind him. Ara stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding, her mind spinning with questions she didn't know how to ask. But for the first time since the platform, she felt something other than fear. She felt seen. Ara woke to pale sunlight slanting through the shutters. Her body ached, but the sharp edge of pain had dulled to something manageable. She pushed herself upright slowly, her muscles protesting the movement. The room was quiet, empty. She felt the absence of Kale's presence like a draft beneath the door. She didn't know what to make of his apology. Didn't know if she could trust it. Trust him. He had ordered her death. Had stood on that platform and watched her suffer. And yet... She closed her eyes, remembering the look on his face when he'd stepped closer. The softness in his voice. The way he'd said her name, it confused her. Made something fragile stir inside her chest. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. The door opened before she could answer, and Marin stepped inside, carrying a tray. The healer's expression was calm, professional, but there was warmth in her eyes. "You're awake," Marin said, setting the tray on the table by the window. "Good. You need to eat." Ara nodded, though her appetite was faint. She moved to the chair, her legs shaky beneath her. Marin watched her carefully, saying nothing until Ara was seated. "How do you feel?" Marin asked. "Tired," Ara admitted. "Sore. Confused." Marin smiled faintly. "That's to be expected. Your body went through something extraordinary. It needs time to adjust. Ara picked at the bread on the tray, her thoughts elsewhere. Marin, what did Kale mean when he said we'd figure it out together? The healer's expression shifted, something thoughtful settling into her features. She pulled a chair closer and sat, folding her hands in her lap. He's trying, Marin said quietly. I've known Kale a long time, Ara. He's not a man who apologizes easily, and he's not a man who changes his mind without reason. Ara looked down at her hands. But he sentenced me. He was going to let me die. Yes, Marin said, her voice gentle but firm. He was, and that's something you have every right to be angry about. But he stopped it. And now he's trying to make it right. Whether that's enough, that's for you to decide. Ara swallowed hard. She didn't know what she wanted, didn't know if forgiveness was something she could offer. But she couldn't deny the pull she'd felt when Kale had stood in this room, looking at her like she mattered. What happens if I don't want to figure it out with him? Ara asked. Marin's gaze was steady. Then you tell him that, and he'll respect it. But Ara, I think you should hear him out. Really hear him, before you decide. Ara nodded slowly, though uncertainty still coiled tight in her chest. Marin rose, resting a hand briefly on Ara's shoulder. Take your time. No one's rushing you. She left quietly, and Ara sat alone with the sunlight and the weight of her thoughts. Kale returned in the early afternoon. Ara had managed to eat a little, had dressed in the clean clothes Marin had left folded on the chair, a simple tunic and soft trousers. Nothing fancy, but they fit. Made her feel a little less exposed. When the door opened, she was standing by the window, looking out at the stretch of forest beyond the compound. She heard his footsteps, slow and deliberate, and turned to face him. He looked tired. There were shadows beneath his eyes, tension in the set of his shoulders. But his expression softened when he saw her standing, and something like relief flickered across his face. You're up, he said. I needed to move, Ara replied. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Kale nodded. He stayed near the door, giving her space. May I sit? She hesitated, then gestured toward the chair by the table. He moved carefully, lowering himself into the seat like he was afraid of startling her. She stayed by the window, her arms crossed loosely over her chest. I owe you more than an apology, Kale said after a moment. His voice was quiet, measured. I owe you an explanation. Ara said nothing. She waited. Kale exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping to his hands. When I was young, my father told me stories. Old stories, the kind most packs have forgotten. About wolves with golden eyes. Wolves who carried the blood of the first packs, before the wars split us apart. He paused, his jaw tightening. He said they were dangerous, that their power could unite us or destroy us, that they were gifts and curses in equal measure. Ara's pulse quickened. She remembered the whispers she'd overheard. Prophecy, bloodline. I never believed it, Kale continued. Not really. It was just a story. Until I saw your eyes. He looked up at her then, and the weight of his gaze made her breath catch. I thought you were Wolfless, he said. I thought you were a liability the pack couldn't afford. We've had too many attacks, too many losses. I was trying to protect everyone, trying to do what I thought was right. His voice cracked slightly, and he looked away. But I was wrong, and I hurt you because of it. Ara felt something twist inside her chest. She wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt. But his words, they sounded real, raw. Why did you gamble on it? She asked. Why push me to shift if you thought I couldn't? Kale's mouth tightened. Instinct, something my father said once, about fear being the key, that the old blood only woke under pressure. I thought, if there was even a chance. He shook his head, his expression bitter. It was cruel. I know that. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I never wanted to break you, Ara. I wanted to see the truth. Ara's throat burned. She turned back to the window, her vision blurring slightly. The truth almost killed me. I know, Kale said softly. And I'll carry that. They sat in silence for a long moment. The air between them felt heavy, charged with things neither of them knew how to name. Finally, Ara spoke. What do you want from me now? Kale rose slowly, moving to stand a few paces behind her, close enough that she could feel his presence, but not so close that she felt trapped. I want you to feel safe, he said. I want you to have time to heal, to understand what your wolf means. And I want to help you, if you'll let me. Ara turned to face him, her eyes searching his. Why? Because you deserve it, Kale said simply. Because I failed you once, and I won't do it again. The sincerity in his voice made something inside her crack open. She didn't know if she could trust him. Didn't know if she should. But she wanted to. Wanted to believe that the man standing in front of her now was real. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be what you think I am. Kale's expression softened. Then we'll figure it out. Together. One step at a time. Ara's breath hitched. She nodded slowly, and for the first time since the platform, she felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. Kale stepped back toward the door, his hand resting briefly on the frame. Rest, he said. I'll come back tomorrow. If that's all right. It is, Ara said quietly. He gave her a small, grateful nod. And then he was gone. Ara stood alone in the sunlight, her heart still racing, her thoughts tangled and uncertain. But beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, she felt something else. Something fragile and tentative. Hope. Ara woke to birdsong the next morning, sunlight pooling across the foot of her bed. For a moment she lay still, testing the quiet. No guards outside her door. No cold stone beneath her. Just the soft weight of clean linen and the faint scent of pine drifting through the open window. She rose slowly, her body still tender from the shift, and dressed in the simple clothes someone had left folded on the chair. Soft trousers, a loose tunic, nothing that marked her as prisoner or guest. Just ordinary. When she stepped into the hallway, a young woman with kind eyes nodded to her from a nearby alcove. Not a guard, a companion perhaps, or a watcher. Ara wasn't sure which. Good morning, the woman said gently. Alpha Kale said you're welcome to walk the grounds. I'll stay nearby if you need anything. Ara swallowed, nodded. Thank you. The air outside was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers. Ara followed a narrow path that wound between low stone walls and patches of clover, her steps cautious at first, then steadier. She could feel her wolf stirring beneath her skin, curious and awake. It was a strange comfort, that presence. Like finally hearing a voice she'd been missing all her life. She rounded a corner near the training yard and stopped short. A small boy stood in the center of the path, crouched low, watching something in the grass. His hair was dark, his shoulders narrow. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. He looked up as she approached, and his eyes went wide. You're her, he said, his voice hushed with wonder. The one with the golden wolf. Ara's breath caught. She glanced back toward the woman, who had stopped a respectful distance away, her expression calm. No alarm, no warning. Ara looked back at the boy. Yes. He straightened, took a cautious step closer. My papa said you're special, that your wolf is different from ours. Ara's chest tightened. Your papa? Alpha Kale, the boy said simply. He's my father. Taryn, Kale's son. Ara felt her heart stumble. She'd known Kale had a child, had heard whispers in the years before her isolation deepened. But she'd never seen the boy up close, never imagined he'd look at her with such open curiosity instead of fear. "I'm Taryn," he said, offering a shy smile. "What's your name?" "Ara," she said softly. "Ara," he repeated, testing it. "Can I see? Your wolf, I mean. Just a little?" Ara hesitated. Her wolf stirred, unafraid. If anything, it felt gentle, protective even. She glanced once more at the companion, who gave a small, encouraging nod. Ara knelt slowly, bringing herself to Taryn's height. "Just for a moment," she said, "and only if you're not scared." "I'm not scared," Taryn said quickly. Then, softer, "Are you?" The question surprised her. She thought about it, let herself feel the truth of it. "A little," she admitted. "I'm still learning what it means." Taryn nodded solemnly, as though that made perfect sense. Ara closed her eyes, let her breath deepen. She reached for her wolf, not with desperation this time, but with gentle invitation. The shift came easier than before, not full, just a flicker, just enough. When she opened her eyes, she knew they were gold. Taryn gasped softly, but he didn't step back. He leaned closer, his face alight with wonder. "They're so pretty," he whispered. "Like the sun." Ara's throat tightened. No one had ever called any part of her pretty, especially not the part she'd feared most. She let the shift recede, felt the gold fade back into brown. Taryn smiled, then did something she didn't expect. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her neck in a quick, fierce hug. Ara froze. Her hands hovered uncertainly at his back. She didn't know what to do with the gesture, with the warmth of it. "You're not scary," Taryn said into her shoulder. "Papa said some people might think you are, but you're not." Ara's eyes stung. She let her arms settle gently around him, just for a breath. "Thank you," she whispered. Taryn pulled back, grinning. "Will you show me again sometime?" "Maybe," Ara said, her voice unsteady. "If your father says it's all right." "He will," Taryn said confidently. "He likes you. I can tell." Before Ara could respond, a familiar voice called from the path behind them. "Taryn." Ara stood quickly, her pulse jumping. Kale approached with steady strides, his expression unreadable. She braced herself, unsure whether she'd overstepped. But when Kale reached them, his gaze softened. He rested a hand briefly on his son's shoulder. "Giving her a trouble already?" Taryn shook his head, eyes bright. "No, Papa. She showed me her wolf. Just a little. It was amazing." Kale's eyes flicked to Ara, something warm and surprised moving through them. "Did she?" Ara nodded, her voice quiet. He asked, "I thought it was all right." Kale's mouth curved into the smallest smile. "It was." Taryn tugged at his father's sleeve. "Can I come back and see her again?" "We'll see," Kale said gently. "Go find Mira. She's waiting for you near the kitchens." Taryn obeyed without complaint, waving at Ara before he darted off down the path. The silence that followed was softer than Ara expected. Kale studied her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "He doesn't trust easily," he said. "Not since his mother passed." Ara's chest ached. "I'm sorry." Kale shook his head. "Don't be. I wanted you to know. What you did just now, it meant something." Ara looked down, her fingers twisting in the hem of her tunic. "He wasn't afraid of me." "No," Kale agreed. "He wasn't." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "How are you feeling? After yesterday?" "Better," Ara admitted. "Steadier." Kale nodded slowly. "Good. I'm glad." He hesitated, then added, I watched you, just now, with him. Ara's pulse quickened. I didn't know you were there. I didn't want to interrupt, Kale said, but I'm glad I saw it. You're kind, Ara, gentle, even when you're afraid. The words settled over her like warmth. She didn't know how to hold them, how to believe them. I don't feel kind, she said quietly. I feel lost. Kale's expression softened further. Then let me help you find your way. Ara lifted her gaze to his. She saw no pity there, no judgment, just quiet, patient resolve. I don't know what comes next, she said. Neither do I, Kale admitted, but we'll take it one step at a time, just like I promised. Ara's breath steadied. She nodded, the tightness in her chest easing just a fraction. Kale stepped back, his hand gesturing toward the path. Walk with me? She hesitated only a moment. Then she fell into step beside him, the sunlight spilling warm across her shoulders. Behind them, unseen, Taryn watched from the kitchen window, his small hand pressed to the glass, and for the first time in a long time he smiled. The council chamber was colder than the rest of the estate. Ara felt it the moment she stepped through the heavy doors, Kale's hand resting lightly at her back. The room stretched wide, stone walls bare except for old tapestries that hung like shadows. 7 elders sat in a half-circle, their faces carved from years of judgment and caution. Kale had warned her this morning, told her what they would say, what they would demand, but knowing didn't soften the weight of their stares. She stood beside him, her spine straight, her hands folded at her waist. The wolf inside her stirred, restless and uncertain. She breathed through it, the way she'd practiced in the garden yesterday. One step at a time. Elder Drina spoke first, her voice sharp as flint. You bring her here without chains? Kale's tone stayed calm. She is not a prisoner. She should be, another elder said, his white beard bristling. Golden eyes, Kale. You know what the prophecy says. Unite or destroy. We cannot risk the second. And locking her away guarantees nothing, Kale replied evenly. Fear will not protect us. Drina leaned forward, her gaze cutting to Ara. Girl, do you even understand what you are? Ara swallowed. Her voice came out softer than she wanted. I'm still learning. Learning, Drina repeated, her mouth twisting. The packs are fractured, bloodlines thin, rogues press our borders. And you stand here, a relic of a time we barely remember, and tell us you're learning? Kale's hand shifted, just barely, closer to Ara's side. She felt the warmth of it even through the space between them. She didn't choose this, Kale said. None of us did. But she's here. And I will not punish her for blood she didn't ask to carry. Then exile her, the bearded elder said bluntly. Send her beyond the territory. Let her be someone else's problem. Ara flinched. The word tasted like abandonment, like every cold morning she'd woken alone in her mother's house after the attack, like every face that had turned away when she walked past. Kale's voice hardened. No, Drina's eyes narrowed. You refuse the council's recommendation? I do. Silence fell, thick and uneasy. Ara's pulse hammered in her ears. She didn't dare look at Kale, didn't dare move. The eldest among them, a woman with silver hair bound in a braid, finally spoke. Her voice was quieter than the others, but it carried weight. Then what do you propose, Alpha? Kale exhaled slowly. Ara heard the steadiness in it, the choice being made. I propose we stop treating her like a threat and start treating her like what she is. A member of this pack, under my protection. Drina's lip curled. Protection is one thing, but you're asking us to ignore prophecy. I'm asking you to trust me, Kale said. I'm asking you to let her prove herself the way any wolf would. Not in chains, not in exile. Here, with us. The bearded elder scoffed. And if she turns? If the prophecy tips toward destruction? Kale's jaw tightened. Then I will answer for it. Ara's breath caught. She looked up at him then, unable to stop herself. His profile was calm, carved from stone and resolve. But she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand had curled into a loose fist at his side. He was risking everything. For her. The silver-haired elder studied them both for a long moment. Then she tilted her head, something shifting in her expression. You believe in her. It wasn't a question, but Kale answered anyway. I do. Ara's throat tightened. She didn't know how to hold the weight of those two words. Drina stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. This is reckless. Perhaps, the elder said mildly, but it is also his right as alpha, unless you wish to challenge him for it. Drina's mouth pressed into a hard line. She said nothing. The elder's gaze returned to Kale. If she stays as yours. Bond chosen, claimed under your name and your responsibility. No halfway measures, Kale. The pack must see her bound to you, or they will never accept her. Ara's heart stumbled. Bond chosen. The words echoed through her like a bell. Kale didn't hesitate. Understood. The elder nodded slowly. Then let it be witnessed. She rose, the other elders following reluctantly. Drina's expression remained sour, but she bent her head in acknowledgement. The elder stepped forward, her hand lifting. Ara of the Lost Line, do you accept the Alpha's protection? Do you stand before this council as bond chosen, knowing the weight it carries? Ara's voice shook. I do. The elder's gaze softened, just barely. Then it is done. She turned to Kale. May you both prove wiser than prophecy. Kale inclined his head. Thank you, Elder Marin. Marin gestured toward the door. Go. Let the pack see her beside you. Let them know she is yours. Kale's hand found Ara's elbow, steady and warm. He guided her toward the door, and she moved with him, her legs unsteady beneath her. The doors closed behind them with a heavy thud. Ara stopped in the corridor, her breath coming too fast. Kale turned to face her, his hand still light on her arm. Are you all right? He asked quietly. She stared at him, her chest tight. You claimed me, in front of the council. I did. Why? Kale's expression gentled. Because it was the only way they'd let you stay. And because I meant it. Ara shook her head, words tangling. But bond chosen, that's not. I know what it means, Kale said. And I'm not asking you to feel something you don't. Not yet. Not ever, if that's not what you want. But I need you safe, Ara. I need you here. And this was the only way. Her throat ached. You're taking responsibility for me. For everything I might become. Yes, that's not fair to you. Kale's mouth curved into something almost sad. Maybe not. But it's my choice. Just like staying is yours. Ara looked down, her fingers curling into her palms. I don't know how to be what they expect. Then don't be, Kale said simply. Be yourself. That's all I'm asking. She lifted her gaze, searching his face. She saw no doubt there, No regret. Just quiet, unshakable resolve. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "Or Taryn." Kale stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You won't. You don't know that." "No," he admitted, "but I'm willing to find out." Ara's breath hitched. She didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know how to hold the trust he was offering her, like something fragile and precious. So she just nodded. Small. Uncertain. But real. Kale's hand slipped away from her arm, but his presence stayed close. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go home." Home. The word settled strange and soft in her chest. She followed him down the corridor, the stone walls giving way to wood and warmth. Somewhere ahead, she heard voices. The kitchens, maybe. Or the training yard. The pack. Her pack now, whether they wanted her or not. Kale glanced back at her, his expression steady. "One step at a time, Ara. Remember?" She nodded again, her shoulders easing just a fraction. One step at a time. Behind them, unseen, Elder Marin stood in the shadowed doorway of the council chamber. She watched them walk away, her aged hands folded before her. Then she turned back into the room, her voice low as she addressed the remaining elders. "The prophecy begins," she said quietly, "and we will see what truth it holds." The chamber doors closed. The lock turned with a soft final click. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling warm across the courtyard where Kale and Ara walked side by side. And for the first time, Ara let herself believe she might belong.